We acknowledge that Washington, D.C. sits on the ancestral lands of the Anacostans, also documented as Nacochenc, who are now part of the Piscataway Indian Nation. We celebrate with gratitude the Native American survivors of forest removal and cultural erasure. We honor the ancestors. This land acknowledgement was prepared with the help of Dr. Gabriel Tayac, Piscataway Nation. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Ada Villalobos, professor at UDC, and welcome to Afro-Latinx Spotlight, hosted by the Latinx Student Association at the University of the District of Columbia. And welcome to our guest, the Honorable Franklin Garcia, who served as U.S. Representative for D.C., Manuel Mendez, Chair of the D.C. Afro-Latino Caucus, Nohora A, Fernandez, Ph.D. candidate at Georgetown University, and thank you to Selva Waldron from Carlos Rosario International Public Charter School, and Gerson Quinteros, Gerson Quinteros from United We Dream for helping us organize this event. I would like to introduce you to Diana Atenco-Gonzalez, who's the president of the Latinx Student Association at UDC. Welcome.
So welcome everyone for joining. My name is Diana Atenco-Gonzalez, and I'm the president of the Latinx Student Association. And the Latinx Student Association was created in the spring of 2019. And we created this association in order for Latinx identified students, regardless of origin, sexual orientation, and other background, to join and celebrate the Latinx identity. And we also hope to educate other people about the Latinx community. And I'll be, Selvin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, Diana. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for partnering with me and Gerson. Very excited. I'm Selvin. I'm a Carlos Rosario School. I'm director of students there. Many of our Carlos Rosario students transitioned to the University of the District of Columbia, where I'm a proud alum of. The university continues to be a great partner of our Carlos Rosario School, and we provide several scholarships for our students to attend. I see in the room a few of our Carlos Rosario alumni who are currently attending UDC. So definitely want to shout out the ones I see in the space, Osman Mia. I also see some current Carlos Rosario student in Delvis in the room as well. I know my colleague Carla is also here, who is a case manager at Carlos Rosario, and there will be other Carlos Rosario team members joining as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So Nohora A Fernandez is a Ph.D. candidate at Georgetown University and an ACLS dissertation fellow of 2020 to 2021, and a research associate at the Afro-Latinx American Institute at from Howard University. Her primary research interests are Latin American literature and cultural studies, visual culture, and studies of the African diaspora. Nohora is a former Fulbright Fellow. Before entering the doctoral program at Georgetown, she had a long tenure as an editorial assistant at Literatura, Teoría, Criteria, Universidad Nacional de Colombia, and Biblioteca de Autores Afro-Colombianos. Currently, she is editing and co-translating with Professor Mark Sanders from the University of Notre Dame the poetry of Afro-Colombian poets Rómulo Bustos and Pedro Velasco, and co-editing a coming issue of Transition magazine about Black arts in Brazil. And Manuel Mendez is the chair of the UDC Afro-Latino Caucus and is originally from La República Dominicana and moved to Washington, D.C. at the age of 9. After graduating from Bell Multicultural High School, Mr. Mendez received his bachelor's degree in African Studies and Communication at Enoch College in Yellow Spring, Ohio. Fortunate to have a host of mentors in his adolescence. Mr. Mendez's passion for supporting positive youth development and the issues that plague the people of the African diaspora are every apparent themes in his pursuit for effecting progressive change in his community. As a constant staple in the Columbian Heights neighborhood, Mr. Mendez dedicated support has followed him to forge long-term, meaningful relations with members of the community. Currently, as chair of the DC Afro-Latino Caucus, Mr. Mendez's goal is to unite Black and Brown people of the Washington metropolitan area. And lastly, but not least, Franklin Garcia served as a U.S. Representative Shadow for the District of Columbia for 3 terms. He is the former president and founder of the DC Latino Caucus and current president of the nonprofit DC Latino Leadership Council. He has held his key positions in the campaign of Hillary Clinton, former DC Mayor Adrian Fenty, Dominican President Manuel Fernandez, and other politicians. Mr. Garcia came to live in Washington, D.C. with his parents and sister at the age of 10. He holds an undergraduate degree in finance from the George Washington University and a Master's of Arts degree in financial economics for public policy from American University. He is the founder of the DC iReporter and the DC Statehood Today shows. He is an active member of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists and lives in Woodbridge neighborhood in Ward 5. So thank you so much for being a part of our panel. And so I would like to ask each of you, how do you identify? Or how do you identify?
I guess don't rush to say that you're going to get first, right? So I can start. Yeah, and so thank you so much for hosting this. For those Dominicans, tomorrow is Dominican Independence Day, so feliz Día de la Independencia a todos los dominicanos que nos están mirando. And so as it was stated, my name is Franklin Garcia, the former U.S. Shadow Rep. I identified as Afro-Latino, as Dominican, as American, and everything in between. It depends, it really depends. I've always thought that you need to bring resources into the community. And sometimes you use the leverage as your identity. So if you look Afro and you're able to go out there and mingle with your Afro brothers and sisters in the at-large community so that you can bring resources to our immigrant community in DC, then you ought to do that. The same thing goes for Caucasian-looking people. If you're able to do that, at the end of the day, we need to bring more resources to our community, and that's what I've always focused on. So I want to say, before I forget, thank you to UDC and everybody who was able to make this possible. I'm thrilled that are able to celebrate our ethnicity during this historical moment or month and share that really with the rest of the at-large community. So it's a good thing that we can record this so that we can actually share the viewing for others to benefit for this particular moment. So that's how I identify.
You can just unmute yourself.
I can go if you don't want to go, Norma. But I don't want to leave you last. Pero la única mujer que, okay. Again, gracias a todos. Mi nombre es Manuel Mendez. My name is Manuel Mendez. I just want to thank UDC and I want to thank the Latinx Student Association and anybody that was involved with this program. I identify as Afro-Descendiente, Black Dominican, in particular because my family comes from San Pedro Macorís and from a little beach called Guayacanes. And if anybody knows, San Pedro Macorís is majority Black. And so I identify as Afro-Descendientes, Afro-Dominican. And for right now, I think the issue with
Wait, unmute yourself.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
The issues with Afro-Latinos is that it doesn't really identify the people, all the African people in the Western Hemisphere, and so Afro-Descendientes encompasses it, and I hope to get into a conversation where we discuss why we should be called African Americans, because we live in the Americas and we are African American, and that better locate us in this hemisphere. So I'm thinking of geography and location to self-identification.
Hi everyone. Buenas tardes a todos y a todas. My name is Nohora A, and I was thinking, I'm gonna try to jump in on what Manuel and Franklin just said, because I felt that we are like, I mean, in terms of politics, I'm a Black woman from Colombia. I was born in the Caribbean, in Cartagena, which is a mainly Black city in the North Caribbean of Colombia. In the terms of the politics and the politics of my research, I'm also a Black woman because I'm interested on the discussion of the production of the intellectual traditions and the cultural production of Black people in the Americas. But as Franklin said something that I really like, which is like, I'm Black, I'm a woman, and a Black Colombian, but I'm also a lot of things in between. No? So I felt that I feel that when we identify ourselves, we also like create those levels, but those levels are not like enough for all that we mean by saying, for example, Black Colombians or Afro-Descendientes. So I'm also someone who reads, also someone who researches, I'm also someone who is interested in poetry, who writes about poetry, and I feel that we have like to sometimes, depending, I mean, identities are also like so fluid. You say fluid, I mean, there is so much fluidity in the identity thing that I felt that in terms of politics, of course, we are like Blacks. I'm a Black woman, a Black researcher, but also all in between, as Franklin said before, and as Manuel was also important. Thank you.
So yeah, so that kind of touches on to like my following question. Why is this identity important to you, and what have been the challenges that you face due to your identity?
So I think that this identity is important because, Manuel, for example, is carrying on the flag of Afro-Latino, and I am not doing that, but I certainly support him in whatever way I can. And obviously, by walking around and doing what I do, and people seeing how I look, that's also part of my contribution to the Afro movement. And so I think that it is important to ensure that whenever you have time and you can dedicate yourself to the cause, that you do. I had a conversation with a good friend of mine last night, and I talked to her about, for example, Celia Cruz is a good example. I don't know that she was necessarily taking on the Afro movement, but certainly by being at the forefront person in Salsa, being exposed to the world, and her image being that of a Black woman, that certainly was very helpful. And so I think that it is important to for us, those that can, that we expose the good side of us. Those of us who are in elected office, who have higher degrees, who are in some way significant in this society. It's important that we become visible, because we need more exposure, a good exposure of Afro descendants to the broader community, to ensure that we get rid of these stereotypes that we constantly see and that plague our community. So it is very, very important to me to ensure that I identify whenever I need to as an Afro descendant, and so that hopefully my good deeds can carry with that image, and so others can also, appreciate that it's good in all of us, and particularly those of us who are Afro descendants.
Norma, or you want to take it, Nora, or do you want me? Okay. So the importance of being Afro-Latino is, all the cultural, political and economic contributions that we have contributed to Latinidad. And going back to identification and thinking, I was just thinking of like, identities, and as Nora was saying, it's a social construct, and so whatever you call yourself it has to be intentional. And so I have always tried to be intentional. Yes, we have a mixture of things, but we have to be intentional to defend what has not been recognized in Latinidad, because we have to fight and struggle with the fact that Latinidad for so long has only shown white passing faces in all spheres, all spaces, and all institutions. We only see white passing faces. So if Latinidad encompasses el cosmo, I forgot the term, but it's el mestizaje de toda la cultura, de all the cultures, African culture, indigenous culture, European culture, then why do we see only white passing faces? So I want to go back to it. We have to be intentional to what we call ourselves, because as a writer, I say the exclusion and the challenges, we talk about the exclusion, the erasure from mainstream Latinidad, the lack of representation on TV, on museums, on nonprofit, corporate areas, politically. And there's a failure that Latinidad has to face. Hispanidad has to face that. Que si somos todos iguales, why is it? Why is it, for the sake of God, why is it that white passing faces, white Latinx faces is the only thing we see? And that's the challenge. And if white passing faces are in political power or in the educational system, yes, we are only going to see a little speck of Celia Cruz, a little speck of Roberto Clemente when it comes down to it. But we don't talk about, Arturo Schomburg. We don't talk about Marta Vega and her contributions. So I'm not going to continue to talk, but I have a lot to say, but I'm going to let you talk. I'm sorry.
I totally agree with what Manuel just said about that we have to be intentional on calling ourselves Black or Afro-descendants. I think that is very important. And when you are asking about the importance of my identity, I feel that for me, at least, it is very important in terms of the politics of my life. And when I say politics, everything is politics, no? So I'm living as a political human being all the time. So I feel that in every space that I am, for example, in the academia, in the arts space, as a Black woman, I'm always trying to make those spaces like these discussions about Black people and about the Black production. So for me, that's like one of the importance. But also I was thinking about when you were asking about the challenges, and as Manuel said, I totally agree on the fact that maybe the main challenge is like the system of oppression, the capitalist system of oppression in which we inhabit and we created, because of plantation system, because of slavery, it created places for people that look as us. I mean, for Black people, for Black Latinos. But something that I would also would like to bring to the discussion is the fact, for example, when you are asking me like, how do you identify as a Black woman in an Afro-Latinx Spotlight? I mean, it's supposed that I'm gonna say I'm an Afro-Latino woman, But I also would like to think about this idea of Latinidad and these concepts and some of the labels that we are discussing here that come from spaces of academy and activism in the States, in the United States, in North America. I mean, because I remember, and I have this story when I always say that I started to be an Afro-Latina once I arrived to DC, because before of that I was an Afro-Colombian woman. So because that's the other thing in the United States, because of the politics of the United States, because of the system of the United States, we are trying to discuss this thing about Latinidad or about Afro-Latinidad, but I just arrived to the States when I was like 27 years old, you know? So before that, I was also thinking about like how the differences, I mean, I'm a black woman from Colombia, which is a different experience from that of a black woman from Ecuador or from Peru. So those levels that we are also trying to, what I want to say is that we also have like to be very careful about the levels we are using in this moment to identify ourselves, because it's also, and about the space that those levels are covering. Because when we arrive to Latin America, for example, which is my case because I still live in Latin America, some of those levels doesn't say enough about our experiences about Black Latin Americanos, no, about Black Colombians or Black Ecuadorians or Black Brazilians.
So thank you for sharing. The next question is directed to Nora. So what is the relation between African descendant to Latin America? The intersectionality.
Can you repeat the question, please?
So what is the relation between African descendant to Latin America? Like
Okay, thank you for that question, Diana. So I think that we could have like entire seminar or congress about that, you know, and people in academies doing this like all the time. But I would actually my research is about representation of the sugar plantations in contemporary Afro-Brazilian and Afro-Caribbean arts. And the thing that I want to say is that we cannot think about Latin America and we cannot think about the Americas without African descendants. No? As Edward Glissant says, the Martinican philosopher, he thought about an idea of plantation America, because actually the foundation of the Americas, of Central America, the foundation of the Caribbean, the foundation of Brazil, of the Indians, is in the plantation economy. And we cannot think about the plantation economy without thinking about African slavery, no? About thinking without thinking on the transatlantic trade. So, if, for example, we have a lot of Dominicanos here, and the first sugar plantations in the Americas were appeared like in the Dominican Republic in 1522 or something like that. That's almost 100 years before you have African descendants in what we now recognize as the United States of America. So the presence of the African people in the Caribbean, in Colombia, in Brazil, Brazil, for example, is the biggest nation. Is the biggest nation outside Africa. Brazil has around 200 inhabitants, and around 60% of that people identifies themselves as African descendants, as Afro-Brasileiros. So I think that that's important, like to recognize, like to have in mind the fact that we cannot think about Latin America or about the Americas without the presence of the African descendants. And because of that, because of the presence of plantation and slavery, that make when we think about the contemporary experience of Black populations and Black communities in the Americas, we also have like to connect it with this really long presence of them that comes from the transatlantic trade. So I don't want to take all the time, but I think that this is like the main point, the idea of that we cannot think. We have to think of the fact of the plantation economy, which is like the foundation of the Americas, the foundation of capitalism, the foundation of the system that we have, like the economical political system that we have living now. So just to say.
Thank you. Manuel or Franklin, do you guys want to add anything?
definitely answer the question. So.
Okay. So the next question is, so what is still being learned or, unlearned about, the history of like the intersectionality? Nora, do you want to take the question? Or
I don't want to talk all the time. I don't know if Manuel wants to say something about it, or Franklin about intersectionality, just for me not to be like.
I'm good. I think that you described it well from your academics. I think you did a wonderful job.
I was thinking maybe if we can like to add something else. It's like because this intersectionality is like a really. I feel that it is a concept that gives us like a lot of opportunities in terms of, I mean, how we can think like the Black experience in the Americas, not. I mean, in order to think like to discuss the different oppressions that the Black people live. I mean, I'm a Black woman or poor woman, like to think about class and race, and the places where you were born, where you grew up, the opportunities that you have. So intersectionality gives us a lot of space to us, like to think about that. But also sometimes I feel that some of those concepts start like to be some kinds of traps, because sometimes I would like to listen, for example, that's what I asked to Manuel and Franklin, because they are like in the politics and in the activism. So in the academia, where, sometimes discussing important things, but once you go to the field, you are with the people who's living these experiences. Sometimes those concepts don't help you. I mean, don't help you to dialogue with the people, because the people is experiencing the life in other ways. So I feel that intersectionality is important. I mean, like for Black Latino Americans, Black Latinos, Africa, people of African descent in the States. I mean, to think these different levels of the oppression, of the system of oppressions that we live in, class, gender, race, no, which are like the oppressions that are over me because I'm a Black woman from Colombia. But also, I feel that sometimes they also start like to be very blurry, you say, very like cloudy in some terms. So maybe Manuel, who is like in the activism, can help us better with that.
Estoy dejando porque as a Black heterosexual male, no puedo interrumpirte. You know what I mean? I can talk about in general in the community about, the lack of Black women voices in Latinidad, Black LGBTQ folks who we barely see in Afro-Latinidad activism at the forefront, right? At the forefront, discussing how Afro-Latinidad fails or encourages, their causes. So for me, I wanted to give you the privilege because en este panel, in this panel, tú eres la representante, pero no te lo quiero dejar todo, pero te quiero dar ese respeto. I want to give you that respect that, we must let Black women, queer women, queer folks talk first, porque yo, personalmente, I am a Black heterosexual male. And I can't understand those, intersectionalities, issues that you might be able to talk about. You see what I'm saying? So, por eso que te dejé. Pero yes, we have all of those. You know what I'm saying? Like we have all of those gender issues, male bravado. You know what I'm saying? We see more male, in our field who are at the forefront. I have been in the DC Metro. I have been one who want to push and have pushed Black women, queer folks to the forefront because I need them to voice some things that I can't. You see what I'm saying? Some things that I'm not privy to. So for me, that's been something I've been fighting with and pushing for.
No, thank you for that, Manuel. I like what you said also because you bring a light to the. It makes me think about, for example, how we can discuss like intersectionality in terms of the presence of Black women in academia in the States. No, that's like a or in arts. No, how many Black women we have? Like, I mean, we have some recognized visual Black women artists in the States, but I mean, if you look at the numbers and you compare with Black men, white women, white men, it's like you're gonna see that it is not enough, that it doesn't represent like the diversity of the varieties of proposals that we have from Black arts. So definitely I mean, if we think of, I mean, we use intersectionality to think about these presences and these absences, you know, these invisibilities, it helps at least as Manuel was proposing like for the activism, but I would say that also about the academic space or about this space of the visual arts. This is still like very hard like to see like all the people that we should, all the Black people or the Black Latino people that we should be seeing in the museums, in the galleries, no? And in the classrooms as well.
And that also reminds me of a recent case in our area of La Bombalera, right? The George Washington professor, right? Of her perpetrating and, you know, her scholarship in the academia, right? And her being of Jewish ancestry, but perpetrating to be Afro-Puerto Rican and claiming that and taking space. So those are some of the issues and challenges that we face with white passing Latinos who do not have our interests at heart. Whether progressive, whether conservative, whether liberal, because you wouldn't be as silent. There's a covert like almost like what Martin Luther King talks about when he talks about the letter of Birmingham. White Latinos have become that the liberals who they mean well, but when it's time to do something, they do not do nothing for Black folks and indigenous folks. Y yo lo voy a dejar ahí para que no.
So, well, thank you for that. The next question is to Franklin. What have been your struggles, like within like representation, like within politics or public spaces?
Yeah, and so I think it's the same challenges we face with many other different things, right? I think that the lack of representation is great. For example, in the Latino community here in DC, you know, I just had a campaign that to run for the council member because we have yet to have any Latinos there. And so, you know, if I were to make it, would I be also the first Afro-Latino and so on and so forth? And so we have challenges in the political world here, not just in DC, but throughout the nation when it comes to Latino overall. And so that becomes more complicated when you narrow it down to Afro-Latino. It's not so clear that we have a whole lot of that. You know, I remember Congressman Diana Atenco-Gonzalez, you know, becoming the first Dominican to get elected to U.S. Congress, a voting member of Congress. And I remember there was a little bit of a feud when he wanted to join the Black Caucus because, you know, he is Afro descendant, I suppose. Not so clear that, you know, how much you have to be a true Afro descendant to be able to be part of the crowd outside of the Afro-Latino movement within the Afro mainstream Afro-Americans. And so we encounter all kinds of challenges everywhere, even within our own communities, I said earlier that what we do is we try to show the good side of ourselves so that hopefully by doing that and exposing the goodness that we have, hopefully we can get rid of some of the negativity associated with Blackness. And so the challenges are there. Television, I think it was Manuel who mentioned the lack of Black people in television. It's within our own community. It's there. There are very few of those, and so and it's not by. I think it's by. It's a pattern, that has been built up over the years, and people think that Afro descendants may not be competent for certain jobs, or they may not be appealing because the image that the society has is of these lighter skinned people. So, I understand we have a lot against us, but we just need to continue doing the good work through ourselves, and hopefully that will transcend, and some of these challenges will go away for the newer generations. That's how we do it.
I don't want to. I don't know. It feels like the good side, the good work. I mean, opportunities and in terms of folks that are around here. One of the first things I did last year for Black History Month, it's so frustrating because there are so many Afro-Latinos in this area who are capable of doing any of the jobs that white Latinos right now are doing, from nonprofit to corporate to political. We have the savviness to be in all the levels of the corporate, nonprofit, and all these institutions. So one of the first things I did, because I had trouble with the Office of Latino Affairs nominating a whole group of folks and not being aware that the whole group of candidate they awarded was white. And one of the first thing I did was to take it to Facebook, but also to take it to the Office of Latino Affairs and say, there are plenty of Latinos who deserve, Afro-Latinos, who deserve to be nominated. So the last year I spent February creating. So the campaign was called Caras Lindas de DC. And it was a campaign in collaboration with the Office of Latino Affairs, because I want to make sure that I problem solve within Latinidad. I don't want to be seen as a problematic character. So I took it to them and personally spoke with the office. And every day of February, I made sure that there was one Afro-Latino person that people saw in different places in government who were Afro-Latino, in nonprofit who were Afro-Latino, but don't get acknowledged, in the community, the elders. It just amazes me, because there's so many of us with credential, because in Washington, D.C. it's very credential oriented place. You have to have the Ph.D. and there's so many Afro-Latinos with credentials, but we fail. And again, I have to fight white Latinx, and we can debate about it, and we can boisterous go back and forth on this, but white Latinx has been silent at all spheres, in all spaces. They have been silent because if Latinidad encompass all of us, they should be defending and knowing that they should be also inclusive, right? If we talk about diversity and inclusive, some of your management, some of your board members should be Afro-Latinos. So when you look at organizations like Unidos USA, why isn't there Afro-Latinos in Unidos USA, a national organization? LULAC. There's only 2 Afro-Latinos executive in the national level, which is Syed Wilson and Marcos at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, I believe. But to go back to my point, I had to let the Latino, mainstream Latino community know that we have so many professionals working in and around Washington, D.C. So yeah, that's my only, like, we have the people and the capabilities.
Okay, so the following question is to you, Manuel. So what are the contributions of pioneers and heroes like yourself to both Latinidad and Black history in DC? And could you also talk about one of the pioneers, Casilda Luna?
Casilda Luna is someone we always talk about. Casilda Luna is Black Dominican from Samaná, who comes in 1963 and is here in Washington, D.C. in 1965. And by 1968, she's the Latino liaison for Change Inc. and contributing so much from, and mind you, 1968, 1968, what happens after 1968 is the death of Martin Luther King. And she was involved with the March on Washington. She was involved with the voting rights for Washington, D.C. to have a right to vote in the national elections. She was part of, advocate for housing. She's the founder of the oldest Latino organization in Washington, D.C. at a point, it was called IFULA, and now it's called Vida Senior Center. She contributed and collaborated, co-founded with Carlos Rosario, the Hispanic festival now called Fiesta DC. I mean, I could go on and on and on about Casilda Luna. Casilda Luna also advocated for the same office of Latino Affairs. Her and a group of others, because I have to say that it was a group and a collaborative effort of Latinos who, at the point when there were a small minority, fought for the rights that now I am able to benefit from. And the problem with that I have with certain things is, in terms of Casilda, is that Casilda for a long time, nobody except for the La Vieja Guardia, the old guard, they knew who Casilda was, but the new generation, the millennials, the 25 and up, don't know who Casilda Luna is. And so, many of discussions with my elders, because that's what on a regular basis I do, is have these conversations where we dialogue about what went wrong with our community, right? With our community, what went wrong? What was challenging at the point? What was successful? And so they transfer that knowledge to me. That's why you see I'm so passionate about it, because it's like historical context is such a beautiful thing, to know the history of our community is such a beautiful thing. Like, for example, knowing that Francis L. Cardozo, the first African-American statewide representative for African-American, is also a Spanish descent. Also builds this preparatory school that now is called under his name, Francis L. Cardozo. So for those of you students, DCPS students, there's Bell, and there's Cardozo for us, or Roosevelt as well. But to know that Cardozo was in this area, and mind you, also, if you read Eslanda Roberson, Paul Robeson's wife is Eslanda Roberson, granddaughter. You understand the contributions of Francis L. Cardozo. You understand Adrian Fenty is Black Panamanian. Norman Fenty, his great grandfather, comes through here in the 1920s. His father comes later on to Washington D.C., but we can't deny that Philip Fenty is Black Panamanian. So there's certain things like that, and there's plenty of them more, like Juana Campos, right? This beautiful lady who everybody knows about Sacred Heart and the Spanish services at Sacred Heart. She's one of the first ones that advocate for Spanish services. Is Juana Campos. I mean, the community wouldn't be as vibrant and without Sacred Heart here, because it's a center. There's plenty of people that come from all different parts of the metropolitan area. And that was 90 years ago. I mean, almost 91 years ago. Juana Campos comes here in the 1940s. So it's like that. It's a curse, but it's a gift as well, to know all of these intricate details of the Latino community and its contribution, but also the struggle, also the faults, politically, right? Because we got to talk about politically. We as a community, because that's what folks don't talk about. We as a community fail to stay in the areas that we lived in. For example, Adams Morgan, Mount Pleasant, all the Columbia Heights neighborhoods. But most importantly, we don't talk about the betrayal, the sellout of political sellouts who sold our community for crumbs. And you get gentrification. You get gentrification. Without the support of the Latino community, the Latino leadership, Anthony Williams don't get in the Wilson building. He needed the Latino community. And in turn, he ignores the Latino community. Promises him so much. So we talk about the reasons why we don't have council members. We fail to understand and incorporate the grassroots energy within our community. No one has built a Black and brown coalition in Washington, D.C. And barely, at the time Anthony A. Williams was going for a candidate, they barely had a Latino coalition. I mean, it's a lot, but we have to understand the historical context and our condition now. And I've been privy and privileged to hear from many of the old guard, and I thank them, because now I have this perspective of the radical grassroots, right? And the power of the radical grassroots. Change don't come from politicians or from top down. It does not. It comes down from the radical grassroots. When 1991 happened, the uprising in 1991, on Mount Pleasant. It was the grassroots that got angered. Leadership was in all parts of DC government. Leaderships, all the Latino leaders were in a part. The Latino Civil Rights Coalition failed us. There's so many issues continuing now. I mean, COVID, for God's sakes. Right now, there's a line from Sacred Heart to Bell Multicultural, or Check, as they called it. And if you know the distance, that's 2 long blocks of Latino families trying to get food, because right now they can't afford, because we're service oriented. Majority of our families either works in service jobs, or host, or dishwasher, or downtown vacuuming. We have failed the Latino community. And we ask ourselves why we don't have a council member in the city council. I mean, the writing is on the walls. I don't know if you want me to continue, because I can, because there's COVID, there's the evictions, the moratorium, it's coming. I mean, it's going to end. What is going to happen to all the families that can't afford their rent to pay all that amount of money? And the thing is that there's not a coalition of Latinos in general to defend and to advocate in the Wilson building for our rights. In case, and then imagine if you are undocumented. Imagine if you are undocumented. And let's not talk about education. If the gap was big before COVID, imagine what is now. How do our families incorporate technologies? We can barely Facebook or WhatsApp. There's serious issues. But we ask why there isn't a council member in the Wilson building. I mean, there was an article like 3 weeks ago, or I don't even remember, a week ago or a month ago, where they're asking this question, but they don't have no historical context about the community, and don't understand that a lot of folks in leadership or misleadership bought us out, sold us. Afro-Latinidad is an issue, yes. But there's a lot of things folks are not talking about. Homelessness amongst undocumented immigrants. And when this moratorium passes, what's going to happen? Who are we going to call? I mean, our abuelas are not receiving these shots because they can't do this online. And how are we addressing those issues? And you may say there's different that's fluff. What initiatives, long-term, short-term? There's plenty of jobs that are not going to come back. What are the short-term and long-term? And this is for y'all students too. This your parents, this your grandparents. What are long-term and short-term solutions these leaders have for our community? And if they don't, what are we going to do about it? And this is serious. Eviction is serious. Homelessness is serious. Hunger is serious. Yes, deportation. Yes, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's happening under the rug. And we are a democratic city. and I'm gonna stop because I don't want to continue this preaching stuff, but it just boggles my mind that we don't have historical context of our situation and a collective memory, and I feel it's done intentionally. But I'm just gonna finish there.
No, thank you so much. I think, we all needed to hear that. You touched, those were very, very, like, valid points, and like the reality that, we're living. And the last question I wanted to ask before we open it up to the audience is, so, beyond February, Black History Month, how can we, educate the public of, about the history, and continue highlighting Afro-Latinx identities? Franklin, do you want to take the question?
Yeah, but before I do that, let me just address something here with the politics. I want to touch on so many different things. And it talks about the need to focus more, I think, in the broader Latino community. And I know that we have to also narrow it down to the various subgroups. But, when I started the DC Latino Caucus over 15 years ago, it was in response to the need to have an organized response to our community politically. We are a predominantly Democratic city here, and we've been able to channel our needs through that process. I think that it's a matter of moment before we have a member of the DC Council. We just had at least 5 Latinos who run for a seat on the DC Council. If we become a state, the legislature is going to open to 21 members on the DC Council, and that's actually on the horizon. It is not, unforeseeable that we will become a state within the next decade. And so I think we have the foundations right now. If you look right now, we have on the Democratic Party, the National Committee Woman, we have a number of people at the party, which is the big establishment here. And so I understand that we're not where we should be, but we're not really that bad. We just need to ensure that our community is more organized and can come together, because when you have all these fragments, unfortunately, though they are necessary and they're good, and I'm so glad, that Manuel is leading effort for our Afro-Latino movement, and we've got the LGBT Latino movement also being addressed. But at some point, what we need to ensure is that we come together as the broader community so that we can empower. And the reason I say that is because in the midst of so much need, like I said, Manuel touched on so many different things, homelessness situation, the undocumented situation, and we constantly have migration, right? New arrivals coming in that need to be adjusted and adapted to the habitat that we currently have, the ambience that exists now. And so that's very difficult to do. So in many ways, it's like a luxury at times to dedicate yourselves just to providing for a community, or like for example, what Manuel is doing, just to focus on the Afro-Latino movement within our larger community is almost a luxury, because we need all hands on deck everywhere, just because we have so much need in our community. And so I just think that it doesn't look as bad, I don't think, for us moving forward. We do have the infrastructure through the Latino Caucus. We can actually get elected people into the Democratic Party. From there, they can grow and really take on and do so much. It's a matter of, I think, creating that network within the broader community, befriending our African American community and the Anglos, to ensure that we have the support in place, and to ensure that we're not so disorganized and that we look like we're all over. I mean, it was amazing that for one seat we had 20-some people running, and so many Latinos at one time, instead of getting organized, and dropping some of these candidates that had no chance, to ensure that we had a strong candidate. It just looked like we just didn't have it together. And so we just need to be more organized. That's what we need to do. But we do have the infrastructure in place to support Latinos who want to run for public office. We have the connection, we have the history, and not only since the Latino Caucus started, we can date back to Angel Luis Irene back in the 70s when he was part of the membership of that voting membership. And so we have the infrastructure. We just need to be more organized, come together, have the different groups come together, and we have had much success with integrating our community with the broader community at the political level, because we have it. Whenever we organize something, that our African-American brothers and sisters in our all communities come together and support us. And so I just wanted to make sure that we understand that we're moving in the right direction. And the seat on the DC Council it's going to happen very, very soon, because we have all the components to make that happen. So I just wanted to take a moment to address that.
Can I say, okay, your question was about, if I remember, it's about what is important to learn more about Afro-Latino identities. I thought that Manuel's intervention, which was so powerful, just gave us like an idea why we should be like discussing Afro-Latino identities. I feel he was talking a lot about intersectionality, for example. I mean, when we are thinking about the Afro-Latino experience, we are thinking about undocumented people, we are thinking about homeless, we are thinking about how these people is doing right now in a pandemic society, in a pandemic world. So that's one thing. But I also like something, I felt that Manuel said something very important when he was talking about how he's discussing and listening to our elders, to the abuelas, to the people that came before. Because sometimes I also feel like whenever we have this discussion about Afro-Latinidad in the States, I feel that in some ways we start like to be trapped sometimes in the first person narrative, So we say the first person in this, the first person in that, the first person, and we are this, and I feel that we need, as Manuel just showed, like we need to think more about the people and the people that was in the communities and the grassroots movements that make the path that create the path to make possible for these persons to be the first one. So if we look at that in that way, we are not going to have just like this first person narrative, which is like also very individual. No, I feel that sometimes it could be problematic because it doesn't recognize the whole community that is like behind these people and that made possible the path of these people. So I felt that, for example, studying more or discussing more about Afro-Latino identities or history, which allow us like to recognize how we became to be in the places we are right now. And the other thing that I want to say about your question is that I really like that you say Afro-Latino identities in plural, because I felt that although we are in this space that comes from, is in DC, is in the States, I feel that when we discuss about Afro-Latinidad, in some moment we also have to start to discuss about Afro-Latin American identities that come to the States, and we start like to be put into this level of Afro-Latinidad, which sometimes, because I feel that even in the space, I absolutely understand that we use these concepts and those levels also like in political terms to be together, but also we need like to start, I felt at least that we have to start like to decentralize some of the experiences that have been like the central in the Black experience. So, for example, why we are not discussing also about Black people, about all the problems that Black people in Latin America is having right now. For example, we have the principal harbor in Colombia in the Pacific coast, which is called Buenaventura. The people in that city, which is a Black city, 95% Black at least, Black city, they have been the whole year, they have been for 2 months now under a war, a war that is related with the drugs, and the Colombian government is not like paying attention to that. So we have, and it could be similar, we have a lot of things going on in Haiti in this moment. So how we are also like, I feel that when we start to think also about Afro-Latinidades or those differences inside the Black experience in the Americas, we also, my point is that we also gonna gonna get like maybe some clues or some hints to start like to build movements together, but also like to start to understand better the experience that we have as Black people in the States or in Colombia or wherever we are in the Americas.
Manuel, you look like you want to say something.
Everything's good.
Okay, so now I would like to welcome the audience to ask any questions that they want. You can either type it in the chat or unmute yourself.
Okay, so I'll go to break the ice. I see some of my students in attendance here. So I'm a professor, so I know my classes, and my students can speak about what I teach in my classes. So, but I would like to know, so I wrote down my question. So let me see. So the importance of the role of HBCUs, especially UDC, in fostering, supporting, and giving visibility to the Afro-Latinx experiences and voices. So I would like to hear more about how we can get universities more involved in your perspective, and using Latinx in academic sense, because that's the Nohora knows what I'm talking about. But basically, you know, supporting our Afro-Latinx students, but also supporting our Afro-Latinx community, especially in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, this is Franklin. I think you guys play a critical role here for the broader community, but also for within the niche of our different subgroups. I think that is important. I said that anything in the United States can be broadcasted worldwide with a lot of power, just like when we think about anything starting here in DC to be the beginning of something big, because we give it the exposure here in DC so that hopefully it could spread nationwide. I think you have the same situation here. You guys can be pioneers. You can grow intellects in the Afro diaspora that can ultimately go out and spread knowledge and become great people throughout the world. And so I am very supportive of the work you do. And I think you have a key role to play in educating our future generations and our leader, not just here, but that they can go abroad and everywhere and really carry that message that we in the Afro diaspora can do a lot of, can achieve great heights.
I have a question. Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Problems with my. I have a question, and it's for many of the community who are.
Oh, the mic is a little low.
It's not working.
Yes, we can hear you now. Now we can hear you.
You can hear me now. So for those in the community that involved in any movement, call it political or get involved so much. Um, how can how can they learn all of this? I mean, out of what Manuel said, I know little pieces, and I have been involved in the community time, but I'm a little ashamed that more of the half that you said, Manuel, I did not know. So I think history is important, not to, for many reasons. One, to make changes. Second, to not make the same mistakes that we made. And that is something that a lot of us has been asking ourselves after almost what 3 years of the migration from the Latin America, why we don't have a Latino city council or in other city government offices. I mean, not even at educational institutions. I mean, we have so many Latinos are CEO and presidents of agencies, and now we are seeing whites as leaders of our organizations, mostly organizations that were founded by Latinos. And now seems like whites are taking over those spaces that we created. I say we as Latinas, not that I was involved. So, and I think that's what I'm saying, that when we don't know history, we tend to make the same mistakes or mistakes. So outside UDC, outside the colleges in the city, what other spaces can to educate the community, not just the students? Because I mean, yeah, you're talking about academics, but this is not academic. This is a community issue that we need to resolve. Community. Many of us I came about 30 years ago to Washington, D.C. And 3 years ago, I moved to Maryland because I was not able to buy a house in D.C. And I think that's not fair. That I felt that D.C. was my home after El Salvador. And so, yeah, what can communities do? Issues.
Hello. I kind of heard the question. I kind of heard the question in there. But yes, um, history teaches us so much. And again, I must say that I've been privileged. Not too many folks have been privileged to sit down with folks and talk to them about their mistakes and talk to them about what happened and why the community looks the way that it does. So I've been privileged to do that. But some of the things that UDC could do that other universities are trying to do in other institutions that are museum institutions who ask me so many questions is the gap. In Latino history, there's a gap. When we talk about Latino history in Washington, D.C. or in the metro area, it starts in the 80s. And professors and those who are invested in knowledge need to understand that there was Latinos who were African descended here already before the 80s. And who were those people? Right? Like who is Marcela Davila? What role did she play in DC government as a Black Puerto Rican? You know, who is Corena Smith and why is it important to our history? Who is Providencia Paderes? One of the first, and I say this kindly, one of the first Afro-Latina in the White House who is an assistant to John F. Kennedy, who becomes an assistant to Jacqueline Kennedy. So one of the ways that academia could help us is the gap that I'm trying to bring into forth with Latinidad, is that we cannot start in the 80s when the civil war happens in El Salvador, or the uprising or the dictatorship of Pinochet in Chile. So there was a lot of in In 1973, a lot of Chileans come to Washington, D.C. metro area, just like when the Sandinistas and the Contras have their conflict, a lot of Nicaraguans come to this area. And the same goes for Salvadorians. But we must in academia, in the academic world, try to find those people that were here before the 1980s. In particular, in the community, es una educación extensa, porque hay muchos estereotipos entre nuestras comunidades. Los salvadoreños contra los afroamericanos o contra los afrodominicanos. Hay muchas tendencias negativas que tenemos que poner el dedo. Y when I'm talking about the city council, I'm not putting an importance on city council. I'm putting an importance on the people in the grounds. We need to cultivate the leadership in our communities. Why did you leave Washington, D.C.? Like, what pushed you to leave Washington, D.C.? Who made that happen? Y esa es la pelea más grande que tengo, because if you leave Washington, D.C., and Casilda Luna talks about that, we lose political power within Washington, D.C. And economically, I understand you can't afford to live in Washington. Some of us are going crazy trying to afford to live in Washington, D.C. Pero tenemos que reflect. We have to reflect. What conditions? Who made it this way? What leadership was in charge to see Columbia Road that the way that it is? I don't know. I've been here for a very long time, and I remember Columbia Road, very vibrant. You couldn't pass the walk paths. There were so many of us there. Adams Morgan was so many of us there. Some of these people, some of these leaders knew what was going to happen to us. I remember 11th Street. They were selling houses for $1. Do you think leadership had the foresight to tell us about that? So in one case, UDC as an HBCU can help us develop research and bridge that gap in history. And then the community that is here need to build a coalition of Black, brown, white, progressive folks that understands the necessity to foster Latino leadership into the city council, and that they not only as a leader, but they address our issues as a community. Don't just go to city council just to be in the first representative for us. No, ¿cómo tú vas a resolver los problemas de nuestras comunidades? Y ese es el punto. I'm sorry.
I think that I was thinking about Carlos. Manuel put something like very important. I was thinking about that. I mean, the academia has to do the research also, no? The academia has to do this research about Latino history, but I also feel that the academia has to do the research about, I mean, the academia has to go to the city, to the community, in order to know what the city is needing in this moment, you know, not just like we have to go like outside the ivory tower and to ask for the people, because I remember that the first year I was living in DC, I was a volunteer in this program. I think it's called DC Reads, maybe Harriet Tubman Primary School, that was in Columbia Heights. And we were reading with students from primary schools. They were like from age 5 to 10, and we were with them like every Saturday, trying to have them like to reinforce their reading skills and discussion skills. So I was wondering like how we as academic, I mean, if our job is like to do research and to do proposals about research and about education, why we don't know like to this organization and we think like, okay, we have this group of Latino students, because in the Harriet Tubman primary school we're mainly Latino and Black students. We have these students, how we can create syllabus or proposals like to, while we are helping them like to develop their reading and writing skills, we also help them like to know and discuss about something they should be or are interested in, which is like their history in the city. You know, I feel that that should be a way, because Carla, I felt that Carla played something important, which was like not just the academia. I mean, so how can we go like beyond the academia? So I feel that, for example, by focusing, I mean, by providing, maybe trying to come, I mean, with proposals, with the grassroots movement, but with proposals for the primary schools, for the children, is something that help us also like to start to build this new generation that is going to be more able to know about their history in the city. But those are like programs that should be proposed by the same colleges. I feel like by the research we do as academics inside the academia. But for doing that, we need like to go outside the academia. So I feel that there is a lot that to have. I remember also that at Georgetown University we had this class on Central American literature. As Manuel said, it was very focused on the production of Salvadorians in the States, on the literary production and the intellectual production, but it was very focused on the 80s and the 90s. So the question is like, what came before, and how can we say, like, I mean, how can the professors and the academics know about that, about the fact that that in this we have this really long Latino and Black Latino presence? So by doing the research, right, by going out from the building space of the academia.
I would like to say something. So, I am actually a research assistant this semester for one of my professors, and the way that I've been like learning about research, I think, you know, in order for us to like expand, you know, history and finding things that you probably wouldn't find in like, you know, a textbook, because most of like the history that is within DC or, you know, in other states maybe, or different other countries as well, is the storytelling. How are we like able to, you know, find people that, you know, have the knowledge? You know what I mean? So I think the idea of how to conduct research, how students are being taught how to do the research needs to change. Like in the world of academia, it needs to change.
If I can say something about that, Diana, I totally agree. But I also feel, because I mean, I can see that on my research. My research is about Black arts in Brazil and the Caribbean. So what I had to do, I mean, people is like, oh, the first thing that you're gonna listen is that there are not enough Black visual artists in Brazil or in Colombia. So I had to go to the streets, you know, I had to go to Facebook. So as I felt that what I want to say also is, like, as a Latino researcher, you will have to come up with different tools to tell these stories. You know, you will have maybe to go to, I mean, in my case, I have to go a lot to Instagram, for example, because a lot of Black Brazilian artists are not in the museums. So they use the social media to expose their art. So I go there, I have to contact them, I have to make interviews with them to record those interviews, you know? So the people is there, as Manuel was saying, you know, we have our elders, we have like the people of the community doing the history. So we have to, as researcher, we have like to go to look for these people. And maybe academia, as it is think in this moment, doesn't give us like the tools. So I feel it's also like very sad to say, because it puts like all the work on us, but for me, at least so far, I had to do that. I had to I had to come up with other ways to do my research, because I was not going to be able to find that in the history books, nor even in internet. So Maybe that's a way, you know. And we have also like to, after that, we also have like to do the work to make like those tools and those ways of doing the research that we have, like to make academia recognize that, you know, to make like the academic space to see that this is the way we are that we are also able to do research in these other ways, that is possible, you know, that in order to know more about the Black experience, the Afro-Latino experience, the Latino experience, we need to look for these other ways to do research, to be academics. And that's totally legitimate, you know. So I think that was my answer.
Does anyone else have any questions? Oh, yes, Morelis.
Hi everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I guess my question is well we know that Latinidad is the beginning what about the contribution of Black culture and Black Latino culture. And so I guess my question will be, as Afro-Latinos, we are the people that contribute probably the most about the culture and everything about Latinidad, but we are still one of the most unrepresented communities inside of the Latino community. So I guess my question will be, what will be of the white Latinos that are silenced right now, that are not contributing to the change of the community? What will be the role of the white Latinos to give more representation to us?
Let me say, you know, as the head of the DC Latino Caucus, one day I hosted a forum and had former council member Jack Evans come out, and Hector Rodriguez, who is a grandstanding member of the community, asked him how he could help us become council members. And you know what the response from Jack Evans was? You need to do it yourself, basically. And so that's what it gets down to. I understand what you're saying, that there is some burden that should be put on non-Afro descendants, but ultimately this fight is ours, and we need to take on the bulk of the lion's share of this fight. And so I think that that's how it'll be. And I mentioned that we do it in some cases without knowing. We talked about Celia Cruz. I don't know that she was actually fighting for the movement, but by being herself and being this grandstanding woman that she was, she contributed. And I think that that's what we need to do. We need to ensure that in all ways we can, we connect with each other, we strengthen the network and the movement, and we get exposure out there. And ultimately, we're going to have to rely on ourselves. And yes, we have partners, and we bring them on board. But ultimately, it is our fight. So just be aware of that. And my thing is, I'm all about unity, and I am all about taking on the broader cause, the immigrant/Latino cause. But when it comes down to the exposure for any subgroup, the LGBT or whatever, it is those people that need to take on, the major work, and they need to ensure that they get their space. Whether it's in media, in health, in housing, whatever it is. And Manuel was right, going to OLA and as the head of the Black Latino Caucus in DC and saying, look, I see that you're exposing Latinos here, but ensure that you include an Afro-Latino in there. And that's what you do. That is what you do, because you should not be waiting for, and I don't want to name anybody, but you should not be waiting for others to do it. This is how it'll be, unfortunately.
I want to say that Celia Cruz been singing Black songs since La Sonora Matancera. So it's all Black. So you know what I'm saying? Kimbara, kimbara, kumba, kimbamba. What is that? Where is that from? I mean, she's been singing Black songs since she was in Sonora Matancera. So she's been representing.
Can I?
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Kika.
I just wanted to interject there when you mentioned Kimbara. Hi, Franklin, how are you? That song was written by my boss, Johnny Pacheco, que falleció el 15 de febrero.
Another black man.
And I want to make, well, he was actually, I told Franklin last night that Pacheco was awarded one of the top 100 most influential black men in America. Wasn't Dominican or Afro-Latino. He was, you know, a black man. And I think he seriously identified with that. And something I haven't heard anyone mention, and, you know, I have not joined your discussion before, is music. And the reason that I bring up music, not only because of my patron, but because of a conversation that I had with Dr. Maya Angelou back in, I believe it was in 2007. And we agreed that we could all come together in música. Tito Puente said it. He said, all you have to do is listen to our drums and know that we derive from Africa. And I think that that's one of the smartest, most creative ways for us to share with one another. You know, you can't see me, but I'm very, very white with green eyes, and for all intent and purposes, I look like a güera, as we say in Mexico. But spiritually and emotionally and mentally, I am Afro-Latina. And I know that because of my music. And I found my salvation, if you will, in the slavery room at the DeSalvo Museum of African American History on Chicago South Side. So that's my input. If we want to really reach and bring people together, music. La música, la música, música. And that's all I have to say.
I mean, I would say we've been dancing. I think Malcolm X said it the best. We've been dancing and culturally manifesting our culture for so long. Yet, politically and economically, we still at the last, along with our brothers and sisters in the indigenous community. We need to begin to, in the 21st century, we passed the 18th century, the 19th century. In the 21st century, we continue to talk about these same little issues about cultural nationalist issues. We should be talking about, you know, the serious power that our communities have. If Brazil is the largest African descendant nation, we should be paying more attention to our Africanness than our Europeanness. We usually fail, and that's why I had to come back to Celia Cruz and singing in Sonora Matancera. The fact that she's been singing African songs for so long.
Well, Celia and Johnny, I don't know if you recall, but actually Pacheco, they all were invited to the Rumble in the Jungle with Muhammad Ali.
In Africa, yes.
Yes,
I mean,
yeah, it was fabulous.
But we need more political power and economic power. We don't need to continue to say, oh, somos iguales culturalmente. En el piso del baile, bailando bachata, merengue, ahí somos iguales.
When I spoke with Dr. Angelo, we came together immediately because we just our grandmothers. My grandmother was Maria Barajas de Yurecura, Michoacán, Mexico lindo querido. Ay! And she came to the United States as a very, very young woman, no money, didn't speak a word of English. She had like 9 or 10 rotten little brothers and sisters, and she still managed to open up one of the first Mexican restaurant bars on the south side of Chicago. And that's where Dr. Angelo and I connected. We are all one and the same, and all we have to do is, you know, share with one another. I don't know what it's like in DC. You know, I'm from the south side of Chicago. I know that Chicago is the most segregated, racist city in the entire nation. And people don't like when I say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. The problem, in my opinion, especially with Mexicanos, is it's our problem. It's not a black community problem. It's our problem. because we have fed into, like someone mentioned a little while ago, I believe it was you, this whole European thing. Well, if we look white, we can pass for white, and then we don't have to associate with black folks. And no one's addressing that.
But that's historically. Historically, that's what white passing Latinos have historically done.
Right.
And what I'm saying is that's a problem. That Latinidad has encompassed all of us. And when you say nosotros somos todos iguales, and the ones that benefit are white Latinos, that's a problem. That's a serious issue that, folks don't address when we say somos iguales todos. That sameness don't trickle down to African and indigenous communities. Because if you see what Africans and indigenous people go through in Central America, we haven't talked about the Garífunas. We haven't talked about Mexican blacks. Recently, in the 2010 or 2018, only recognizing Afro-Mexican when we know that Yanga Gaspara, or Gaspar Yanga, was one of the first, and it has a town in Mexico, one of the first liberators in the Americas is Afro-Mexican, born in Mexico. We don't talk about black Salvadorians. We don't talk about Garífunas. We don't talk about black Costa Ricans in Limón and the struggles that they go through. And we barely talk about black Panamanians in the canal, in the mixture of Caribbean, West Indian ancestry and Spanish ancestry and French ancestry in Black Panama. So sameness only benefits white Latinos. That term and Latinidad encompasses within that, and that's the issue. When we talk about music, we can't be the same in the dance floor, but segregate yourself when a gentleman, when a lady brings you a black African person to your family and segregates that person or discriminates them personally. So we have to, in Latinidad as well, can you bring for those folks that to take it into interpersonal relationship, can you bring a black boyfriend or girlfriend to your family member, to your family? And that happens here in DC. There's plenty of families that will not accept a black Dominican coming into their home, but in the dance space, they would adore you.
Well, I think you're confusing. I'm not talking about just going on the dance floor and kicking. No, I'm not. I'm saying all we have to do is listen to the music, and that's what I do. That's how I share my Afro-Latinaism. I don't walk around telling people I'm an Afro-Latina, and I want you to know that I'm an Afro-Latina.
I don't think you should.
I know that I am. Right. I know that I am. I know where I found my freedom, and it was there once again on the floor of the slavery room in the DuSable Museum of African American History, and I was led there by the power of Israel Lopez Cachao, his music. So
more power to you. More power to you.
But as far as, again, I think personally, as far as Mexicans are concerned, the biggest problem and the biggest bridge that I see is dealing with our own ignorance, and that's a sad truth. It's a sad, sad truth. All you got to do is look at, Spanish television. Half of them are white with blue eyes and blonde hair. I had people in New York tell me, "Oh, you're not the real Mexican. You're like the Mexicans from the soap operas." Because that's what keeps being projected out there, right? And half-naked women. So that's all I have to say.
All right. Well, thank you for that. So without, further ado, thank you so much for being our panelist and for our attendees. Thank you so much. And, maybe we could continue and have another event like this in the future. But,
Thank you.
I want to say, I know Manuel probably wants to say something else, but I wanted to say thank you so much for bringing up such important conversations. I think that for Latinos, it's very important to acknowledge the anti-Black racism, and that color blindness doesn't really help support Afro-Latino communities in the US and abroad. But I think that I'm going to invite you back to UDC. You always have a space. We can do this every month. We can do this anytime, because I do it in the classroom, but I just want to make sure that we're also engaging with the community, listening to activists, politicians, other scholars. But I just want to see if anyone else has a final comment before we close, Diana.
Yeah. Well, this is Franklin again. I think I'm on mute. Yeah. I just want to say again, thank you so much for putting this together. There is a big need for something like this to continue, not just during Black History Month, but throughout the entire year, as you mentioned. And I'm glad that you've made yourself available for future panels like this one. And there was a question out there in the chat that talked about how do you get involved in the community. And so from the political stand, I'd just like to say that there is a place for everybody in the community. Here in DC, you can serve your community in so many different ways. You can become a commissioner, you can join your civic association, you can do so much. That's how you get us exposure. You know, I have attended a number of forums like this, and to me, it's just amazing. Now that I am no longer the United States representative for the District of Columbia fighting for DC statehood, it is incredible for me how this issue has become a Black and white issue in terms of contributions to the cause. And that's because my voice is limited now that I'm no longer the representative. And so I think that it is important for us to be out in the community and give ourselves exposure. That's how you do it. So become involved, get out there. I like to see more faces. Every time I go to a different event, every time I join one of the Zoom meetings, I like to see more Afro-Latinos involved, in Latinos overall. I think that we're just missing everywhere. We're missing in action, just not the Afro-Latinos. That's like a commodity in some cases, but just Latinos overall. We need to have people engage and involved and get out there. That's how we empower ourselves. Manuel talked about at what point are we going to be on the council? And I understand what he said. It's not just about getting there. It's about what are you going to do for our community once you get there? Well, we need to get there first, brother. Let's get there. And then I assure you that if we are out there, that we are going to do something with that, okay? So thank you so much again for the opportunity, Selvon. Thank you for making this happen. And again, let's continue to have some more. Gracias, Manuel y Nora.
Gracias a todos, gracias a los organizadores, a las profesoras, faculty members, all the UDC. You can find us online. We are not shy at folks contacting us and collaborating with folks, as long as it is an equal collaborative effort. And yeah. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone. Thank you to Manuel and Franklin for the panel, and thank you to Are, to Diana for coordinating everything. Thank you for the invitation, and to the people that come to listen to us, to the students as well.
Bye, everyone. Have a good
Gracias,
night.
Bye, everyone.